Yeah, they tune in, it's the dude bass rolling deep. Mic check like that, file, let's hit a beat. Voices flowing like the river, knowledge on the spree. Every episode of Journey, come ride with me. Just hit play, it's a vibe, can't you see? The dude bass, we breaking it down. From the underground to the top of the town. Life's effects, intertwined, wearing the crown. Podcast kings and queens, we wearing the gown.
Okay, tonight we're going to start a new series called Campfire Tales. Now, anytime you get on our feed or our YouTube channel, whatever it is, and if you see the Campfire Tales artwork up there, you know we're going to be talking about ghost stories and paranormal stuff and stuff like that. So this is going to be Campfire Tales episode 1. Hope everybody likes it, and we're just going to talk about some ghost stories that we think's interesting. And Daniel's going to kick us off. Daniel, go for it, buddy.
Well, all right. So I'll start off, and my story that I'm doing is a story that was written by Charles Dickens, and it was written. The date at the end of the story that's in the book that I have is 1866. Now, I don't know if it was written in 1866 or if it's just 1866 is just referenced, but somewhere in the 1860s is when this story took place. Now, Charles Dickens actually wrote quite a few ghost stories, and this is one of the better ones, the ones that I've always liked. I've read it a few times, and then it's also on like this scary stories record that I had when I was a kid, and that's when I really started to enjoy this particular story. But this particular story is called The Signal Man, and the main character, it's told in first person, and the main character is never named. And actually, the Signal Man is actually never named either. There's only 2 main characters in it. But the story starts off where the main character is walking through the woods, and he's got this railroad track, this set of railroad tracks that's going through the woods with him. And the railroad track kind of veers off in a different direction, goes off into the woods, and this guy stays on the walking path, and he's walking along, and all of a sudden he comes up to this like a stone bridge. It's just made out of stones. And he looks down, and the stone bridge is actually the top of a tunnel. And the railroad tracks are in the tunnel. So he looks down, and he sees this old guy that is a signal man. And what the signal man's job is to redirect trains, and he had this light that he would shine, and if it was red, he wanted the trains to stop, or it signaled that there was something wrong, and if it was clear, then the trains went on without a problem. And the story goes like this: this signal man's little it called it like a hut. Basically, it was a little office, just a little bitty old room, like a 10 by 10 room, kind of out in the middle of these woods. And he's standing on top of the tunnel, and he looks down at the signal man, and he tries to get his attention, but as soon as he hollers out at him, a train comes through the tunnel, and it blocks out all the sound, and it's vibrating and everything. And so he waves his hand, and it's set, the story is set at like dusk, sundown, and the sun is in the guy's eyes. So the guy covered his eyes with his left hand and was waving with his right hand, and he yelled down at the signal man, "Hello down there." And the signal man is looking around. He don't see him at the time. The train passes by, and then they can hear each other again, and he calls out again and waves with his right hand, "Hello down there." And the signal man kind of looks up at him, and then nods him to come on down. He finds this little set of stone steps, and the main character goes down there, and he's talking to the signal man. And the signal man the whole time was acting really weird, and he was acting like he was scared. So the main character was like, I don't understand, do I remind you of somebody or something going on? And the signal man was like, I don't want to talk about it right now, but come on in and have a seat and we'll talk about something else. And so they did, and they went into his little hut, and it had a little fireplace there, and it had a telegraph machine that allowed for communication between other little stops and whatnot. And that was pretty much it. And the signalman's job was just to hold his light, make sure that the tracks were, going the right way, and make sure that there's no problem with the trains that are coming out of the tunnel. And so the guy, he made small talk with him, but the guy never would tell him what was wrong, and he kept acting really nervous. So the main character ends up going back to, his house, wherever it was that he was staying. And the next day, he comes down through there, and actually, before he left the first time that he met him, the signalman said, when you come back, don't call out. Don't say anything. Just come on down. He was like, okay. And he showed back up the next day, and he was like, well, you want to talk about why you were so nervous? And the signalman said, why is it that you said what you said? And he was like, I don't know what I said. And he said, why is it that you used those exact words yesterday when you greeted me? And he said, when I said hello down there? And he said, yeah. He said, I was standing on top of the tunnel. I seen you down here. It just seemed like, the right thing to do. Nothing really told me to say it. He said, okay. And he was like, well, I don't really understand what you're talking about. And he says, well, he said, about a year ago, he said, I was working third shift. It's the late shift. And he said, I heard this guy yelling, hello down there. Look out, look out. And he was shouting it. And the main character says, okay. And he says he walked outside, and up there at the train tunnel, he seen this figure of a person, and he had his face covered with his left hand, and he was waving really violently with his right arm, and he was yelling, hello down there, look out. And so he said, part of my job is to make sure that everything is safe with the trains and all that. So I ran to the guy to make sure that he was okay. And he said, and by the time I got to where the figure was standing, it was gone. And the guy says, well, I don't understand. He says, maybe you just thought you saw somebody. He said, no, I saw somebody. The person, whatever it was, spoke to me. And by the time I made it there, all I heard was the wind coming through the tunnel. And the guy was like, okay, well, I still think that it's, in your head, kind of hallucinating and whatnot. But, why does it make you nervous? And he says, because within 6 hours of me seeing that, he said the train come through and stopped, and there was a violent death on the other end of the tunnel that happened around the same time that I saw that figure. And he said, well, that's still kind of coincidence. And he was like, well, he says, say that if you want to, but 6 months later, he said, I seen the figure again. And he said, had its face covered, waving violently with his right arm and saying, hello down there, look out, look out. And he says, I ran towards the figure again. I kept the figure in my sights the whole time. And by the time I got to it, the figure was gone. And it's always standing under the red light that hangs above the tunnel. It's always standing near that light. And he said, okay, so it's still coincidence. And he said, well, about 6 hours later, there was another train that come through, and somebody had suffered a violent death on the train around the same time that I saw that figure. And so the main character at this point is kind of getting freaked out. And the more that the signalman is talking, the more nervous that he gets. And so he wasn't able to calm the signalman down. And the signalman says, you scared me so bad whenever you yelled and waved your arm like that. You look just like that figure. And he said, and part of the reason why is that last week I seen that figure again, and it did the same thing, except I haven't heard of anything that's happened. And he said that's always like an omen of death. And the guy never could get him to calm down. He was like, I don't understand. He's like, you've got to be hallucinating or something. And he was like, I really think that the reason why I haven't heard about anybody dying is because that is a warning to me. And he said, I think that I'm going to be the one that dies next. And the main character talks to him some more and couldn't get him to calm down. So he was like, yeah, I just left. And so he left, and his intent was to come back the next day. And so the next morning, the guy worked third shift, So the next morning, he said that he was walking through the woods and he saw a train that was already stopped at the signalman's little hut. So he went down and he saw this group of men that was talking, and he said, where's the signalman? And he said, he's right here. And there was a body that was covered that was on the train platform, and they uncovered it, and the guy identified the signalman. And he said, what happened? And he said, this guy was, perfect at his job. He was always safety conscious. He knew more about, what was going on than what we did. And he said, I was in the train driving, and I was driving through the tunnel, and I didn't see, the red light or anything like that indicating for me to stop. And he said, when I come out of the tunnel, the signalman was walking with his back turned to me in the middle of the railroad tracks. And I started yelling. And the main character said, what exactly did you yell? And he said, it was too violent for me. It was too scary for me. I locked the train's brakes down. I covered my face with my left hand, and I started waving very violently with my right hand. And I started screaming, hello down there. Look out, look out. And then the train cut him down. And then Charles Dickens kind of ends the story right there, indicating, the signalman knew that he was going to die. Now, I paraphrased that story a lot, probably butchered it trying to talk, but that's the whole gist of the story. And I always thought that was really, it's just a cool ghost story,
Yeah.
like it's the signalman. The setting was at the signalman's little hut was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of out in the middle of the woods. You had the train tunnel. You had all them echoes and different sound effects and the wind coming through the train tunnel. And then you got the signalman that's basically, he's seeing this specter or this figure that keeps appearing to him, this ghost. And every time he sees it, something bad happens. And then it ends up being his own death omen. So I always thought that was a cool, creepy little story. The actual story.
Charles Dickens. He's got some good stuff. Same that was written, and it was originally published in 1866. And you can think back in those days, trains were, they were like were they steam engines back then? Maybe something like that.
They probably were. I'm sure that they.
But you can think sitting back in the 1800s in a old little shack out in the middle of nowhere and all that stuff. That'd be terrifying, man.
Yeah,
that's an awesome story. Even when you were telling it, kind of goosebumps a little bit. You're looking through the window. So that was a really good story.
And I just reread it when I got home from work today, just to make sure that I had all my bases covered and everything. I pretty much knew the story already, but to reread it, there was some things that Charles Dickens added in it that really created the ambiance of, you didn't know if the signalman was losing his mind or not, because he had been doing that job on third shift, at night. He'd been doing that job for so long, and there wasn't anybody out there. From the way that he wrote it, it was like this little shack, was out in the middle of the woods, basically. And the only reason why it was there was because of that train tunnel, and he had to make sure that the tracks were switched right and had to make sure that everything was safe. So the guy didn't have nobody to talk to, and the whole area was just creepy. I've always loved that story. I've always thought that it was really cool.
I want you to think about something. Have you ever walked up a set of train tracks in the middle of the night, especially out somewhere where you're not around a bunch of houses and stuff like that? There are a few things on this earth that are creepier than a set of train tracks at night, man, because just the silence of them, and most of the time it's a long straight, runway or whatever you want to call it. But train tracks themselves are creepy. Then you write a story like this around it. That's a very good story. Never heard it, man, and I'm glad you talked to us about it, because I really enjoyed that.
Well, I've always thought the train tracks were creepy anyway, even during the day.
Yeah.
I've never walked them at night, but I have walked them during the day, and it is creepy.
Yeah, I tell you what, just a quick story, Brent, and I'll kick it back over to you, man. But the tracks where we live in Inglewood, my mom always told me a little story. When she was younger, she had to walk those tracks to school every day, and one night, back in those days, the parents would send the kids to town to pick up something or whatever. But they sent my mom to town to pick up something. And she said she's running up the tracks because it's getting dark, and she's trying to get back before it got dark because, train tracks are creepy. And she swears up and down she tripped over a dead body on those train tracks. Now, I've never heard of anybody being ran over by a train in Inglewood, but, she's told me that story, more than one time about, tripping over either somebody maybe been laying there asleep or whatever. But back in those days, people done crazy things.
That's
but
true.
yeah, that went down right in our little town of Inglewood, Tennessee, right there. But moving on, Brent, you got a little story to tell us. Let's hear about it, man.
All right. So one of my friends from college, after we graduated, she got a job in a small Midwest town. So she moved out, and she didn't know the area. She had a couple friends there, a couple distant relatives, but no one she felt comfortable living with. So she was trying to find a nice apartment building or apartment complex to live in, and she just couldn't find anything affordable, couldn't find anything that she liked. So she started asking some of her friends and relatives, um, where she should live. She went out, toured some different places. She finally found an apartment that was affordable that she liked. Whenever she told her distant relatives and her friends about the apartment complex, they told her, "Hey, you shouldn't move there. We've heard that it's haunted. We hear some really bad stuff going down out there. I don't think you should move there." But she didn't believe in ghosts, so she was like, "I'm going to move there. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm going to move there anyway. It's going to be fine." So she packs up. She moves to the small little town, moves to the apartment complex. Everything's fine for the first couple of weeks. Nothing major. She works nights. She works third shift at her job. So, but while she's at the apartment, everything's totally fine. But as time goes on, she starts noticing something's a little bit off. The first thing that started happening was she promises that things were moving around in her apartment. So it just starts off with small stuff, like she left her keys on her table. She promises that she left her keys on her table. Goes to bed. She wakes up, the keys are on the kitchen counter. So it's like, okay, well, she could have just forgotten. Like she could have, it's so easy to forget stuff like that. She would, another example would, she would be asleep, she would wake up, she would see her kitchen light was on. And she's very OCD. She knows for sure that she turns off every single light in her apartment when she's asleep. But she says that her kitchen light was on. So it's like, okay, stuff is starting to get a little bit creepy. Then she starts hearing footsteps in her apartment. She starts hearing them above. She doesn't have anyone that lives in the apartment above her. It's not like a 2-story apartment. So, but she starts hearing that there is a big attic up there, though. And she started hearing footsteps. She's like, okay, that's a little bit That's a little bit creepy. She would look up in the attic. She wouldn't see anybody. She started hearing footsteps in her kitchen and her living room, and she would open up. She always made sure she closed her bedroom door. So she would open her bedroom door and look out in the kitchen, the dining room. No one's there. What is going on? She would come back home from work. Like I said, she's very OCD, and she would see her TV is on, and she knows for sure she turns her TV off. And it's like, what is going on? So she really started getting in her head, and she thought she was going semi crazy because these are just small things that she knows that she didn't do, but they're so small that when she tells anyone, like at her job, that these things are happening, they don't believe her. I mean, they think that she's just overreacting. So one night, she gets off from work early. So she's leaving work. She pulls into her apartment. She just gets a really, really bad feeling. She goes to open up her door, and she sees that the door is unlocked. Her front door is unlocked. She opens it up. She says, "Hello, is anyone there?" No one answers. Her heart is racing. She runs in. She sees her bedroom door is open. She always closed her bedroom door. She looks in, and she sees a man sleeping in her bed. It turns out that the landlord of that apartment complex had a son who he was released from a psych ward, and he went into the custody of his mom. And because he was in the custody of his mom had the keys to all the apartment complexes. When he saw that she moved in, he was infatuated with her. So he started going in while she was at work and started kind of halfway living there. And he would sleep up in the attic. He would come in while she was asleep, and he would sleep in her bed at nights when she was away at work. So
That's crazy. That's creepy.
That's a story kind of like a stalker kind of guy, man. You know what? We joke about this house I live in. It's so big that there could be other people living here that we don't even know. And there's several times we'll sit around here and I'll be hearing stuff, and I'm like, because like there's an attic here I've never been in. I'm like, man, that might be some people up there just kick back watching TV, playing cards, or whatever. But you know what freaks me out about that story, Brent, is that's something that could really happen, man. You know what I'm saying?
It did not too long. It did not too long ago, over towards where we're from. You've probably heard about it on the news, but the guy was being in transit for the police department, and he escaped, and then found in a house, and he lived in some woman's attic for like 6 months before they found him in the attic.
God,
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I've heard of that happening several times. There was even a guy that set up a camera in his house, and he caught the woman coming out of the whatever place she was in. She would come out, get something to drink, eat his food, and then go back in there. And I reckon she lived there for like a year before they
But
found out about it.
Stuff like that is so creepier than having a ghost. I mean, just imagine a human being living in your house and you have no idea. I mean, how many times do you honestly check your attic? How many times do you go up into your attic?
I've never
many
been in
times-
my attic,
How many times, if you have a crawl space down in your house, how many times do you actually go down and check your crawl space underneath your house to see? I mean, no one does that on a regular basis.
Except
And
get Christmas decorations once a year.
Yeah, that's about
they
it.
they know when you're going to do that. See,
Yeah.
you guys just think about it tonight when you're going to bed. You guys have unchecked. You have unchecked spaces in your house, and
You just wrote a movie.
well, that's
Yeah.
like that little. They used to have during Halloween on Comcast. They had a thing called Sounds of the Season. They would play all these little Halloween party music and different things like that. And while the music was playing, they would pop up these little. They called them shorts or something, and they were just like 1 or 2 line little scary things that would pop up. And one of them was, and it said, I found a picture of myself sleeping on my cell phone this morning. And then it was dot, 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 and it said, I live alone.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Stuff like that creeps me out, man.
I should have added that to the story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Remember that for next time. Dustin, do you have something spooky you want to talk about, man?
Well, it ain't necessarily a story or a movie. This is a real place that I was looking at, and it's called the Witch's Circle. It's in Kingston, Tennessee, or right in that area. But they used to there's still rocks and circles and stuff up there where they found pigs being sacrificed and animals and all kinds.
Now, where's this at? Where's this at?
Kingston, Tennessee.
Kingston, Tennessee. Dang,
Yeah.
Man. I didn't know we had devil worship in Kingston.
So the big story that happened years ago about that is the story is that they had sacrificed a baby and had nailed it to one of the trees next to the witch's circle. And they've been most anybody would tell you not to go up there, but there's ghost hunters that still goes up there. And there was a crew a few years ago went up there, and every time they've went, they got run off. And one of the other guys that was on the crew, and he had his own YouTube channel, comes down from that tree, supposedly the tree that the baby was nailed to, and he said, man, my back's on fire. So he raised his shirt up, and he had like monster claw marks down his back from his shoulder blades to his lower back. And it actually made a ghost or sci-fi channel. After that, they had got interviewed and went on the show, but it was on the local news too. I think I sent you that little clip on there of that video, but it's pretty
That's
interesting. And it's a weird, scary place though, of a dark.
Yeah, in Kingston, I don't think I've ever been to Kingston, but I think I want to stay out of it now.
I've drove through it several times.
Yeah, you made me not want to go to Kingston.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we thought we'd stop in here tonight. I know we took last week off. We had some personal stuff went on, but we wanted to, kind of break it up a little bit. We like to talk about ghosts and stuff like that every now and then. So, if you like this kind of video, just give us a like and a comment, something like that, and we'll try to do some more. But us, we're always going to be talking about movies or video games or whatever is on our mind that week. But you will be hearing some ghost stories from time to time. So we appreciate everybody listening to us, and we'll see you guys next week. See ya, bye.
See ya, bye.
Yeah, they tuned in, it's the Dude Bash rolling deep. Mic check like that, file that's in a beat. Voices flowing like the river, knowledge on the spree. Every episode of Journey, come ride with me. Just hit play, it's a vibe, can't you see? The Dude Bash, we breaking it down. From the underground to the top of the town. Life's effects intertwined.